From the outside at least, business is booming for soccer in Canada. Last year, the men's national side reached their first World Cup finals for over 30 years, and the women made history with a gold medal finish at the Summer Olympics in Beijing. In Christine Sinclair, the country boasts the highest scoring female player in soccer history, while in Alphonso Davies, it has one of the finest young players in the world. But rather than taking the sport to a whole new level domestically, Canada's recent success on the international stage seems to be creating a whole new host of problems. Both the men and women's side have now threatened job action over funding cuts and shadowy finances. In fact, the women were on strike this past weekend, and the drama centers upon a 2018 agreement between Canada Soccer and Canada Soccer Business, a for-profit organization made up of Canadian Premier League franchise owners. According to the deal, Canada Soccer Business acquired all broadcast rights and corporate partnerships related to Canada Soccer's core assets, including the national sides. In exchange, CSB would pay Canada Soccer an agreed-on annual fee and keep all other revenue to help fund the new Canadian Premier League. 5 years ago, when the Canadian men's side were nowhere near World Cup qualification and the women's game enjoyed a much lower profile, the deal was seen as a short-term plan to get the new domestic league off the ground. But with both sides now excelling on the world stage, things have gotten more complicated. CSB gains all revenue from national team sponsorships, but is under no obligation to channel that money back into the national team setups. That means that even though they're enjoying greater success on the pitch, neither the men's nor the women's national sides are reaping the financial rewards, with the women in particular seeing major funding cuts this season. To make matters worse, that 2018 agreement carries a fixed 10-year term, with Canada Soccer Business reportedly retaining the option to extend it by a further decade. So unless the players can force a change, Canada Soccer could be hamstrung by a poorly thought out business deal until the year 2038.
Welcome into room 442. James Sharman, Mikey Singh, myself, Sarah Pararia, and unfortunately again, we're talking about Canada Soccer and not in the best way. Gentlemen, I feel like this is becoming a consistent thing. 2 weeks ago, we heard about the John Herdman debacle and everything that happened there. And now just last Friday, it's back, and the Canadian women's national team and Canada Soccer are going head-to-head. A lot of issues with the budget. The Canadian women's team feel like they are not getting what they deserve, especially in a World Cup year. When the men's team were allocated X amount of money, the women aren't getting the same. The CPL's been brought into it. Janine Becky and Christine Sinclair told TSN on Friday that they will actually be going on strike. Now they're not allowed to be because allegedly they were going to get sued by the CSA, who had to fly down to Orlando. This is all just 6 days before the She Believes Cup starts. So it'll be February 16th. Canada will be taking on the USA. Everyone will be participating as of right now, but they will be participating in protest, is what they said. That was a lot just to get out there.
Great
James.
summary, by the way.
Great summary.
Holy.
Really, the terminology, everything was bang on.
Yeah.
I'm really happy to hear because it's exhausting, James.
It is exhausting.
I'm tired of this.
That's a great word to put it, exhausting.
Yeah.
Precisely what it is. And yeah, they were on strike illegally. They were on strike. So in these issues, it's, I won't say it's common practice, but it's not uncommon for a threat of a legal action from the association. They were within their rights. Now, that being said, so the players then said, okay, we will play under protest, but they've now put through legislation now to strike legally in around 17 days when the She Believes Cup just ends. So this thing will raise its ugly head all over again early March.
That's what I was going to say.
That's what's going to happen.
That's
Same thing.
It doesn't seem like there's an easy conclusion to all of this anytime soon.
Well, there is. Easy conclusion is transparency, Canada Soccer showing the players what they want to see. And I'm hearing that they will do that. But until we see it ourselves and we hear from the players, because the players are using the media right now very well. Yeah. They're playing the game very well. They are keeping nothing to themselves. It's all out there for the public to judge, right? And Canada Soccer cannot win the public opinion. They can't win that battle, right? Mm-hmm. They never have. This goes back many, many years. So players are playing it really, really well at the moment. So if Canada do give the information they want, if the CSB then does the same, Canada Soccer Business does the same and says, here it is, here's the deal, then there might be some really decent dialogue. But until then, it's going to be more of this, I think.
I think what you said, decent dialogue, but I think what we alluded to when we did our chat over the weekend, I don't know if you show them the CSB deal that they're going to be happy about the deal. It seems like you open that door, it just opens a whole new can of worms. So I don't think there's an easy resolution to sorting all of this out. I think it's going to be very complicated. Like, sorting out collective bargaining agreements in general is extremely complicated. But then when you add in the fact that they're almost handcuffed by the CSB deal, it adds another layer to just how difficult it's going to be to sort of get this across the line. So I don't think that, as you said, this is just the start. This is going to be a long process.
Okay, Mikey, let me ask you though, because you follow the Canadian men's national team very closely. The women are now participating in a World Cup this year. After winning a gold medal last Olympics, not to mention that this women's team, at least for my lifetime, has been the pinnacle of football in this country. The men have been irrelevant until maybe the last 4 or 5 years. It hasn't been good. Not only in terms of pay equity, but we're talking about a team that for the, like I said, my lifetime, let's say the last 30 years or so, they have been the better team, the more prominent team. Is what they're asking for, that outrageous?
Without seeing the numbers, no, right? Because we're talking about the reigning Olympic champions. We're talking about a team that has the potential to not just compete and contend and do well at the World Cup. They have the potential to win the World Cup. And then when you think about how far this program's come in the last 2, 3, 4 years, men's and women's, just soccer in Canada as a whole, you're now talking about an opportunity that's in front of you to capitalize on that momentum and really take this next step forward in what should be a really exciting couple of years. And for the women, it's extremely tough because you pointed out you're 6 months away from a World Cup. You don't want to be talking about this stuff. I mean, the men went through it. They had to protest one of their games, which is something they definitely did not want to do because they had a World Cup coming up and you only have limited windows. The women are now in the same position. So nothing has changed. And while Canada Soccer has come out and said that any deal that they strike will include pay equity, there's other barriers.
And it's beyond just pay equity, it's equity in general, right?
Exactly.
It's the investment, right? And of course they deserve the same. If what Canada Soccer says is true, then they deserve the same as men, 100%. Now, it's a bit more complicated than that because you look at what the men's qualifying process was. It was 14 games, at least 14 games, right, around CONCACAF, some pretty far-reaching areas, right? For the women, they played 4 games to qualify. They played more games last year, of course, friendlies, other tournaments, but 4 games to qualify. There's less football for qualification for the women compared to the men. So there is like a slight difference in what that might cost. But again, show the numbers. The players have been demanding these numbers for a long time now. What are you hiding, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with the CSB. That's a big elephant in the room, the CSB. Canada Soccer wouldn't sign that deal today.
No,
right?
no chance.
They wouldn't sign it today, right? They signed it when they did. And I didn't read too much anti-CSB deal when they signed that deal because Canada Soccer was in a mess. And there wasn't much money coming in, and they guaranteed not just $3 to $4 million a year, they guaranteed a domestic professional league, which we've been campaigning for decades, right? So if you fight the CSB deal, and there might be a clause in there might be a loophole, who knows, right? We're going to find out. If there is, the women and the men will find it, all right? If they then fight the CSB and that deal goes away, there's a danger that so too will the CPL, right? That's not good for the game in this country either. So there's so many layers here. It's so complicated. I didn't like what the men did, and we spoke about it on Saturday when they kind of denigrated the CPL in their statement.
CPL just caught a stray.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I thought they're in this together, right? And you need that to feed the national team. There's players in that team now who came from CPL. That was a mistake because that's the first time I've seen any negative reports on social media against the players through that entire thing when that was mentioned. That was a mistake. They might want to redo that or rethink that at least. But yeah, it's way more nuanced and way more layered than people think. It's easy to jump in your emotion. Yeah, let's hammer CSA. Right, I understand why, right? It's been, poorly run, it seems, for a very long time. But you have to kind of step back sometimes and look at the big picture and know the full story here because Canada Soccer's not going through the media. The players are, and I don't blame them for doing that at all. So I would in their situation as well, and it's working. They're leveraging what they want, but yeah, like we said, this is just begun. The money from the World Cup goes into the bank in March, all right? So that's then when the funds are available, that will change, I think, a few things, because you might see a CBA deal, if not getting done, getting certainly put back on the front burner at that point.
Okay, let's just take a little step back between the men and the women's side. But we got a message from one of our producers overseas. Hello, Edwin, who was kind of making a little jab at us, saying, "You guys really can't get it together with a football team in Canada." And it's true. This has been going on now. Does it not make you feel slightly embarrassed? I'm not talking about for the coaches or for the players, but just in general for the nation, that we're like saying, football's becoming, Canada is a soccer nation. I don't believe it is, because it can't get itself together. Just in the sense of the own association, how are the fans supposed to get behind it if everything seems so discombobulated all the time?
No, you're right. And instances like this tell you that it's not a soccer nation yet. But also going through this process where it seems like there actually is movement on a collective bargaining agreement where you could strike historic deals for both the men and the women. That part's at least, that's part of the process for me to becoming a soccer nation. So yes, it's annoying and we're living through it, and it's embarrassing at some extent because this is now a global story. You're seeing articles written all over the world about how Canada soccer is forcing its players back to play, and how Canada soccer, or the women's national team, is striking. Christine Sinclair, the all-time leading scorer in international football, is right at the focal front of it. So it is a little bit embarrassing, but at the same time, I want to say I see it as progress here. I don't know if you feel
No,
the same
I
way.
kind of do. And don't forget, there are football nations out there that also have a lot of labor issues, right? We see this around World Cups, teams threatening to go on strike from apparent traditional soccer powerhouses. This happens all the time, right? But it is embarrassing, you're right. But I know what you're saying in a weird way, a perverted kind of way. It's progress, because now there is actually money out there, we think, in corporate Canada that complicates matters and forces awareness and other factions to open their eyes. Like, let's look at this deal that was signed back in 2018. Is that really good for us? Doesn't seem good to me.
Well, the way that I see it is like 15, 20 years ago, Canada soccer, does they really care if it's women go on strike or it's men go on strike?
No.
They don't care. But now they have to care because they're demanding it because they're that good.
Yeah.
Right?
I think, the CSB have to stand up to at some point and take some of this flack, right? And I think the players at some point will turn their attention to that deal specifically. Right now they're hammering Nick Bontis, Earl Cochran. That's the target, and it's worked really well. But at some point that deal will be opened up, right? And they will target that group of owners and the CPL and say, we want answers from you. That could get really nasty. So at some point, do you try and control the message? If you're the CSB, do you stand up, make a statement, make yourself more available? Maybe that's the way. Do you say, listen, we understand the landscape's different now than it was 5 years ago. We'll sit down and talk with the associations, the unions, and maybe we can restructure this thing. Is that even feasible? I don't know. I mean, they sign a deal. Right, they sign, right? If there's loophole, there's loophole, fair enough. But if there isn't, deal was signed, you can't really blame them.
It's a business.
It's a business.
Yeah. Capitalized.
Isn't it fun talking about this rather than national football on the pitch?
I mean, the exhaustion is real. There will be, I'm sure, more to break on this story as the week continues. And as I said, She Believes tournament begins Thursday, February 16th. Canada taking on the U.S. We'll try our best to keep you guys covered with this ongoing story.